Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and today we're back with another exciting team composition video. I have today Blade, a very well requested character by you guys, and he was only released in CBT 2 and a lot of updates didn't happen. But the video today that I'm going to be sharing is more of broad concepts on this character rather than number crunching all the min-maxing numbers and stuff like that. So a lot of what we say is going to be relevant as well for game launch. I'll leave in a pinned comment below any key updates that we have once I have more details of his stats or his finalized stats for game launch as well. So anyway, let's jump into the video. So what makes Blade special, or maybe I should say what makes him hard for newer players to use, is that he likes to manipulate his HP bar. He has skills and ultimate that all adjust or lower his HP, and as he takes more damage, he then has a counter mechanic where he lifesteals it up. What this means is you're noticing that his HP will go from like 100% to maybe 50% to 30% and then jumping back up to 80% and stuff like that. If you're a newer player, this might be quite uncomfortable, or especially if you're playing without like healers or shielders. It's going to be a bit uncomfortable at first to get used to him. But one thing to note, of course, he's easier than character like Arlen, who's in a similar case as him where he manipulates his HP bar as well and likes to play at low life. Blade doesn't care how low his life is and scales off his max HP as well as some of the HP that is lost while he's trying to build stacks and countering. So Blade works really well with both shielders and healers, and that's one thing and how he distinguishes himself from Arlen, who really prefers more shielding rather than healing. Okay, so now let's get in with that short narrative. Now let's get into in terms of his free-to-play comp that I think will really work well regardless of what characters you have. So these are all 4-star characters, and I assume that there's no gacha. We'll slowly add more gacha as we go along. So the first character I think that's going to work really well with Blade, of course, is a character like Natasha. Blade doesn't mind healing, and of course sometimes he might drop too low and be at the risk of one shot. Natasha definitely mitigates this quite a bit by healing him up. If you are not interested in Natasha and maybe you are using her for your second team already, you can always play a character like Mark 7 or even Fire MC. And these two characters work really well because Blade doesn't mind having aggro drawn to him, and when he drops below a certain percentage of his life, March actually doesn't draw aggro with that shield, as there's a cap off on the percentage before the aggro is drawn. And since Blade always manipulates his HP bar, you can easily use this to your advantage if you just want to give him a bit more shielding and not draw the aggro. And March's shield is actually pretty thick as well. Fire MC offers team-wide shielding in terms of AoE shield, and Blade doesn't mind taking some damage even from the very thin shield because he can build his stacks to do that counter lifesteal mechanic as well. And for those of you who don't really know what I'm talking about, it's actually this talent right here. This is his counter mechanic. His talent and his counter attacking lifesteal mechanic is every time he takes damage, he gains 1 stack, and once he gains 5 stacks, he will use this counter that deals damage based on the amount of HP loss that he had while building up these stacks. He then of course restores a certain amount of his HP. Don't bother about all these numbers and crunching your calculator and stuff. These were of CBT 2 data and they weren't introduced in CBT 3, and I will leave all like updates and key information in the pinned comment below for those of you who are more interested in more updated content as well. So this is really his bread and butter and what makes him a very independent character. Because he has a very strong counter-attacking mechanic, he doesn't actually require a lot of babysitting. He does a lot of damage, and when you have a character that's scaling off of max HP, means that naturally he'll be having a very high amount of base HP, the total HP that he has. This means that even if he's like at 50% life, he might even have a higher HP than some characters, for example maybe Zila or Yanqing, who generally are much squishier characters who don't really want to build into HP. This makes him very good at sustaining quite a lot of damage, especially in AoE fights or even single target fights. He doesn't really get one-shotted very often as well. So this is in the 4th slot, a more defensive scenario. I might even go with Mark 7 over the rest because the rest are just so much more versatile and can be played into many other team compositions. But as you can see, Blade is a very flexible character. He doesn't really mind either of them. And in the slot 2, probably I will run a single target damage dealer like Dan Heng. Of course, in this comp you don't really have much choice because if it's like total free to play, you have to play Dan Heng. He's the only single target damage dealer without gacha. You might try to force in maybe a character like Ting Che, who is a bit more AoE if you really wanted to. But for now we have no choice but to double down on wind element, but this will easily go away with a bit more gacha. So in terms of Blade doesn't really care too much about attack buffers. One reason is because a lot of his damage also comes from his max HP, which means characters that are attack buffers like Asta in the 3rd slot generally benefit him much less than other characters who scale purely off of attack, as he scales off a lot of HP. As you can see, for example, if we pull up his ultimate ability, just one of his many abilities, you can see that it does based on his max HP, and attack is only like a 14.4% scaling as of CBT2, and like these multipliers likely will get lowered across the board since what we saw from the other characters as well. But basically, it's a lot of max HP scaling from his kit, and an attack buffer like Asta and Tingyun might not be as valuable to him, which we will adjust in a little bit once we talk about gacha. So this is basically like the free-to-play team without any gacha that I would recommend to most people like start off with. But of course, if we are playing to the game to this point, we probably have a few gacha characters, and the first thing I'll do is swap out a character like Dan Heng straight away, and I'll put in a character like Susang. Susang offers the varying element compared to Dan Heng, and it's also very independent. Both of these characters generally are very independent. They don't really rely too much on certain characters as well. Asta's speed buff is nice to let all of them move faster and also buffing the team holistically across the board. But I think that instead of playing Asta, you might want to consider playing a character, for example, like Pella in this case. Why Pella is when you have a defense shred on the enemy, it basically, in a sense, is a pseudo buff to both his max HP as well as attack, because it increases the damage that Blade does. This is one of the rare advantages that debuffs have against attack buffers like Asta. And defense down is basically you don't care whether the character scales in defense, HP or attack, you will be increasing the damage output because you lower the enemy's defensiveness. Whereas attack buffers only benefit like attack characters much better, and this is one of the examples where characters like Asta or Tingyun definitely fail to perform compared to characters like Pella, who just shreds the enemy defense. Very strong character, and if you notice most of my other videos, I hardly recommend Pella as a priority across other than versus these two. But of course, in this case, we have a character that's not purely scaling off of attack, and that's where Pella really starts to shine, especially when we have more and more characters added to the game that doesn't scale off purely attack. And really, in the 4th slot, there's not much change here. You can basically play this comp as it is, and what this comp is, although you don't have any speed ups, Susang has a lot of speed up on her own. You have good defensive stats, you have good shred for the enemy. Pella also does decent amount of ice damage, especially with her recent buffs to her kit as well. Very strong team, relatively independent. They can be played separately. Hook is pretty slow, although it's a very strong single target damage dealer. Does rely on Asta quite a bit, and as mentioned, Asta doesn't synergize as well with Blade, and that's why Hook is on a much lower priority, even though she has very good single target damage. Okay, and now another character that I want to talk about as we also very nicely head into the pay-to-win team. Pay-to-win team is basically those teams with like more than one 5-star characters, but really, even though the word is pay-to-win, I'm sure a lot of free-to-play characters or free-to-play players might already have multiple 5-star characters, especially after the first 2 banners have been released and it's Blade's turn and stuff like that. So Ireland does require quite a bit of more babies sitting in a sense, and he does require expensive 4th slot from the likes of Bailu or even the likes of Gepard. You can see their respective team composition videos. I do talk about this a little bit more in depth. And Blade definitely has similar requirements to Ireland, even though he's not as strict and is more flexible to play. He doesn't mind either one of these 2 characters to give him either a very thick shield or a revive just in case something goes wrong. And in terms of this 3rd slot, I think I would generally prefer debuffers, for example, like Pella, as well, just to get around the basis that Blade doesn't scale off purely with attack. And currently, most of the attack or the harmony characters we have in the game buff either speed, turn order, or focus a lot on attack. Bronya probably might be the best out of all of them because she at least can focus on Ireland, maybe boosting him up and give team-wide attack crit damage buffs. But then again, Blade has diminishing returns since he scales mostly with his HP primarily as well. So that's one thing to note. And of course, this is for like the standard 5 stars. You can always play a character, for example, like Yanqing in this slot. You can play a character like Zila in this slot if you are going for a limited character. Maybe Zila, you put her at the very start of the game. These 2 characters work really well with Blade as well, since they are single target damage dealers in nature. And if you are going the route of, for example, Gepard, Yanqing might be more favored because he doesn't like taking damage, and Gepard does solve a lot of that. Zila is relatively independent. She doesn't really care too much of the team composition. She has a very good 25% self-speed buff, so you don't really require characters like Asta or Bronya to a certain extent. So this does bypass Blade's mitigation, and she doesn't mind defense shred on the enemies as well. Helps her one-shot units to go faster as well. So I think these are like some team comps. An example of a team that I wouldn't really want to play with Blade is a team with an AoE erudition character, since Blade already has very, very solid AoE damage, and he does struggle a little bit with single target damage. So that is one thing to know. And in my opinion, like out of all the characters in the game we have so far, the best character that works really well with him will be a character like Lota. The reason why Lota and Blade work so well together is because Lota has this ability where when a character drops below 50% of his life, he immediately heals them up. And Blade often goes below 50% as he's like using his skill to enhance his basic attacks and taking damage and stuff like that. You don't want him to accidentally die, and Lota does help you bypass a lot of that as well. Of course, another character you could always run is a character like Clara. Clara is also a really strong character in terms of like either in the 3rd slot or maybe in the 4th slot, depending on what you want. She does draw aggro away and also has a very good counter-attacking mechanic. In a sense, if you're playing a Blade, Clara, and maybe a healer character in the 4th slot, it's really becoming more like a bruiser counter-attacking style where you want the enemy to dish damage to you and then you counter-attack to hit them back. But currently, we don't really see counter-attacks as much in the meta because it's really more of like a DPS check, and there are certain amount of turns that you want to eliminate the enemy in. So moving faster generally helps you clear DPS checks much better as well. And if you like such content, do like and subscribe for more of such future content. Thank you so much for watching. Do click on these 2 other videos as well for more of these content. See you in the next video.